My loyal and long-suffering subscribers are flooding me with missives, aiming to peruse the intricacies of the narcissistic disorder. And I am here to serve, if not to protect. My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, and I'm a professor of psychology. And today we are going to discuss two concepts: the locus of grandiosity and type fluidity. Don't you just love these phrases? Okay, Shoshanim, stay with me if you are masochistic and listen to the rest of this. Here's the missive. I would like to ask you, Mr. Vaknin, are all narcissists all the same at the very core? And thus, all methods of triggering, controlling, manipulating them are the same. For example, telling each one of them that they're not special in any possible way. Or does each one of them deep down want to be special in their own way? For example, telling a narcissistic musician that he is not special in terms of computer science, thus his, her not caring about not being special in IT. I'm asking regardless of them being in either overt or covert state of narcissism. Okay, let me translate this into English. I think, I believe, I hope, what the author had in mind was the following. Is each narcissist invested in a self-concept, a fantasy, a narrative, a false self that says you are good at everything, you are perfect in any and all subjects, you are always right, you are omniscient, you're all-knowing. In this sense, you're godlike. Is this how the narcissist sees himself? Or does the narcissist say, I'm the best there is in music. I'm not great in football, but I'm great in music. Which is it? Now, if you go online, self-styled experts will mislead you yet again. They will tell you that narcissists want to be the best, the richest, the most famous, the most handsome, etc., etc. That is not true. Narcissists want to be unique. If they can be unique by being drop-dead gorgeous, so be it. If they can be unique by being intelligent, so be it. If they can be unique via intellectual pyrotechnics, they will. If they can be unique via sexual conquests, they will embrace this option. The narcissist just wants to be considered special, unprecedented, sui generis, one and only. The narcissist doesn't care what leads him there. Narcissist doesn't care which attribute, which trait, which behavior, which element in personal history makes him, renders him unique. He just wants to be unique. So you can find narcissists boasting that they've had the greatest bankruptcy in their country. Or you can have narcissists boasting that they are huge, enormous victims. Victimhood is actually the brag of a narcissist. Many narcissists brag about being victims. They have something called competitive victimhood. They are martyrs. Failures, if the failure is big enough, if the defeat is notable enough, if people pay attention to the narcissist because of the magnitude of the ruination and collapse, so be it. The narcissist is perfectly happy with that. Narcissists don't want to be the best or the greatest or the richest or the most famous and so on. They want to be attended to. They want attention. And whatever grants them attention, whatever engenders and generates attention, is perfectly legitimate. Now we call this the locus of grandiosity. The locus of grandiosity is the self-enhancing, self-aggrandizing narrative that leads the narcissist to believe that he is one of a kind, that no one has ever been like this, present, past, and ever will be like this in the future, that he has experienced and he has endured, and he has secured, and he has accomplished things that no one else has ever done. So, as I said, it could be negative things. The accomplishments could be negative. Like many serial killers boast about the numbers of their victims. Many narcissists are very proud of the calamity and the apocalypse that they brought upon families, businesses, neighborhoods, communities, or even nations. It's the only requisite for the locus of grandiosity is I'm known, I'm unique, I'm special. People pay attention to me because they've never seen anything like me before. I am so outstanding. I am so unique. I am so idiosyncratic that people agape, um, are there to monitor my success or my failure, follow my life, and so on. So one could say that the emphasis is on being a celebrity. A celebrity is someone who is known for the attention that he or she is getting. And so a celebrity is someone who is famous for being famous. And that's exactly the core of the narcissist. The essence of the narcissist is about appearances, about garnering and harvesting attention. Not about doing anything real, but doing whatever it is in a way that makes it stand out, that makes it notable. So the locus of grandiosity is a narrative, it's a story, it's a piece of fiction, it's a script, it's a movie, which renders the narcissist in some way unique. And we call this process self-enhancement. Again, remember before we proceed, the narrative could be self-denigrating, self-negating, humiliating, self-shaming. I'm a victim. I'm an enormous failure. I'm a bad person, evil. I'm, whatever it is. But as long as the narcissist is at the center of attention and never wavers from this. So narcissists do not care about anything, and they do not care about anyone outside the locus of grandiosity, outside the fantastic narrative. The answer to the question that has been posed by the subscriber is that a musician who is a narcissist would care about music. He would consider himself the musician to end all music, the musician the likes of which has never been before, the musician the likes of which will never emerge in the future, a musician who has revolutionized music, a musician who has redefined music, a musician whose talent, whose expertise, whose professionalism is unequaled, unparalleled, unique, idiosyncratic, amazing, fascinating, etc. So the focus, the locus of grandiosity, would be on music in this particular case. And yes, this kind of narcissist wouldn't care much if you were to tell them that they are not very great in astrophysics, because that's not the locus of grandiosity. Now, a narcissist could develop a universalist focus, a locus of grandiosity. A narcissist, for example, could consider himself a polymath, a new Renaissance man, a jack of all trades. A narcissist could say, I'm good at anything I put my mind to. I could be great in physics, and I could be great in biology, and I could be great in chemistry, and I could be great in marketing, and it's just a question of applying myself, of making the decision. So a universalist locus of grandiosity is an indiscriminating narrative that says, you are in principle, you, the narcissist, you are in principle made to be, constructed to be the best at whatever you choose to do. And we have, for example, someone like Donald Trump, who says that wherever he decided to apply himself, he became the best and the greatest. He believes that he can master medicine and physics and psychology and marketing and real estate, and you name it, and foreign affairs, and international affairs, and finance, and you name it. It's just a question of applying himself. And if he were to decide to apply himself to any field, he would be much better than anyone else in that field, than any expert in the field. He would become the preeminent and dominant expert in that field. So yes, if you were to ask Donald Trump if he could win a Nobel Prize in physics, he would say, of course I can. I'm just not in it. I'm not a physicist. I'm not dealing in physics. But had I decided to, I would have won easily a Nobel Prize in physics, in chemistry, in medicine, in literature, and now in peace. So while the vast majority of narcissists have a well-defined, well-demarcated locus of grandiosity, with narrative boundaries, a locus of grandiosity that says, I'm a great musician, I'm a great biologist, I'm an amazing physicist, or I'm the greatest failure ever, or I'm the most trodden upon victim ever. So these are a demarcated locus of grandiosity. Some narcissists, a small minority, luckily for all of us, have a universalist view of themselves. They think that in principle they are superior. In principle, they are made of material which is far, far into the future in terms of evolution. They're evolutionarily advanced. And so, whatever they decide to do, wherever they decide to apply themselves in, whichever field they choose to enter, they're likely to end up at the top. But this is, again, a very small minority. Now, the problem with the locus of grandiosity is that it is not constant. It is not stable. And this confuses many, many people. Laymen, self-styled experts, of course, and even scholars. The locus of grandiosity is shape-shifting or ever-shifting. It's not stable throughout the lifespan. It is reactive. And it is reactive to two processes known as decompensation and collapse. Decompensation is when all psychological defense mechanisms are switched off. The individual is no longer able to process reality in a way which is not mentally injurious. Reality barges in, invades, penetrates, and it's harsh, and it's destructive. Defense mechanisms, psychological defense mechanisms, as the name implies, they're a defense against reality, or at least against the unadulterated, unmitigated version of reality. What they do, defense mechanisms, they rewrite reality, they reframe it so that you could survive. Sometimes all defense mechanisms are shut off. They're disabled. For example, when one is confronted with extreme public humiliation and shaming, or when one is caught in a natural or man-made disaster, etc. So in these situations, the defense mechanism shut off, and this process is known as decompensation. Similarly, in a state of collapse, the narcissistic or psychopathic or borderline individual is unable to obtain feedback and input from the outside, from other people mostly, that will allow them to regulate their internal environment. One extreme type of collapse is known as narcissistic mortification. So, in a state of decompensation, and definitely in a state of collapse or mortification, there is what we call type fluidity. In other words, there's a change in the locus of grandiosity. There's an alteration of the fantastic narrative that underlies the functioning or allows the functioning of the narcissist's internal dynamics, or the borderlines, or the psychopaths. So, for example, when the narcissist decompensates and then collapses or is mortified, there is a transition from narcissism to borderline. The narcissist becomes a borderline. He becomes emotionally dysregulated, suicidal, and so on and so forth. At that point, the narrative that is incorporated into and comprises the false self, this narrative is rewritten completely. And It's as if the individual has transitioned from one state to another. And this is known as identity diffusion or identity disturbance. So, when the narcissist, for example, is publicly shamed, humiliated, exposed, and has no defenses against this, the defenses have crumbled. This reality is too much, cannot be buried, cannot be ignored anymore. It intrudes, and the defenses collapse. There's a state of, the defenses are switched off, there's a state of collapse or mortification. At that point, the previous locus of grandiosity, the narrative that has kept the narcissist alive and functioning hitherto, this narrative is discarded, and the narcissist comes up with a new narrative, with a new locus of grandiosity, which resembles a lot a borderline personality organization. So it's fluid. There's a transition from a narcissistic, grandiose narrative to a vulnerable borderline narrative. So when the narcissist is confronted with these situations, he becomes a borderline. When the borderline is confronted with these situations, for example, when the borderline is rejected or is abandoned or anticipates rejection and abandonment or is engulfed, exactly the opposite. She feels suffocated by the intimacy. In all these situations, the borderline transitions from a borderline locus of grandiosity, a narrative that somehow sustains the borderline, keeps her alive literally, because many borderlines are suicidal. So she transitions from this to another narrative, to another story, to another piece of fiction, to another fantasy. In other words, to another locus of grandiosity, and she becomes a narcissist, actually. When people with borderline personality disorder are confronted with rejection, abandonment, engulfment, decompensation, collapse, and mortification, they become highly narcissistic. They become grandiose, they become entitled, they become aggressive, and even to some extent defiant. And this combination, this confluence, is sometimes known as secondary psychopathy. What happens to the psychopath? When the psychopath undergoes the same processes, unpleasant, ego-dystonic processes which are uncomfortable, even threatening, processes of decompensation, of collapse, and so on, the psychopath becomes a narcissist. So the borderline and the psychopath transition into an enhanced form of narcissism. They become highly narcissistic, and the borderline even becomes a psychopath, a secondary psychopath. The narcissist, on the other hand, becomes a borderline. This type fluidity applies also within the diagnosis. So, for example, an overt narcissist, which is exposed to collapse or decompensation and so on, often becomes a covert narcissist. And overt becomes a covert. We now know that overt narcissism and covert narcissism are phases in the life cycle of every narcissist. Every narcissist is sometimes overt and sometimes covert. So the transition between overt and covert is mediated via the collapse. And this transition involves the rewriting of the grandiose part, the rewriting of grandiosity, inventing a new story, a new narrative, a new piece of fiction which justifies and underlies and buttresses the grandiosity. So there is a narrative transition, a change in locus of grandiosity between overt narcissism and covert narcissism within the same person. There is a change in types. There's a collapse, decompensation, mortification. They induce either a change in type from overt to covert, from cerebral to somatic, or a change in diagnosis from borderline to narcissist, from narcissist to borderline, from borderline to psychopath, and from psychopath to narcissist. This is type fluidity. The consequence of type fluidity is we never know what would be the narrative we would be confronted with these people. They are not the same person from one day to the next, from 1 month to the next, and from 1 year to the next. They don't have a fixed identity. They don't have a core. They're in flux all the time. And this identity diffusion, this identity disturbance, is why narcissists, for example, sometimes regard themselves as great musicians and sometimes regard themselves as great victims and sometimes regard themselves as great astrophysicists and sometimes regard themselves as great husbands. And the locus changes and shifts all the time. Whatever gets the deal done, whatever guarantees the uninterrupted flow of narcissistic supply. But the majority of narcissists, coming back full circle to the question, the majority of the narcissists are invested in a highly specific, delineated, demarcated narrative, which is known as the locus of grandiosity. I am a great musician. I'm an amazing financier. I'm the best physicist ever. I'm a great husband. I'm a wonderful father. These are all narratives which underlie, they are the foundation of the locus of grandiosity, and the narcissist is committed to these narratives and to these narratives only, excluding all other people and all other options. Again, to remind you, there's a tiny percentage, and they have a universalist or universal locus of grandiosity. They think they could be good at anything, with anyone, all the time. Never mind the circumstances. Never mind the environment. Never mind other people. They are essentially supreme. Their very being is perfect and superior. They are godlike. And so they can metamorphose, they can shapeshift, they can transform themselves, and they are so malleable and so flexible and so transigent that they could become good at anything. It is their choice. It is their decision whether to be a physicist or a painter or a husband or what have you. Whatever they choose to do, they would rise to the top and they would define the field. And yes, they believe that they can transition from one field to another with alacrity and seamlessly and accomplish the same outcomes in all these fields because they are a superior universal machine, to borrow from Turing. Okay, I hope I clarified the issue and why narcissism is so confusing, so disorienting, because there's nobody there in this void, in this black hole. There is a story generator, and this generator generates stories all the time, and the problem is these stories have nothing in common. There's no common thread or denominator. There's no continuity because there's no identity. The narcissist is completely discontinuous, disjointed. That's why we can safely say that the narcissist does not have a self, does not have an ego, because the best definition of self we have is that thing, that construct that maintains a sense of continuity across time, across space, and across circumstances and environments. Narcissists don't have this. They are discontinuous, borderlines of the same. And again, identity diffusion, I encourage you to search the channel. There are videos dedicated to this crazy making phenomenon.